did you do in the Atlantean War? Did you stand up and fight? Did you lie on the floor? What did you do when the sky turned to flame? Did you run for your life? Did you call out my name? Something that happened a long time ago. We should have seen it, but we didn't know.
Hi, and welcome to Spotlight Siskiyou. I'm your host, Richard Dingus, with the Siskiyou Media Council. And today we have David Theno, who is the writer, producer, musician of the new hit, Electromagnetic Soul Vehicle. So, David, the production was introduced at the College of the Siskiyous and was a huge success. Can you tell your audience what inspired you to write this work?
Sure. It's a little bit of an interesting and longish story, but some years ago, my wife's best friend, her name was Christina Pa, who had been friends with us from when we lived in Davis, so 20 years of really close friendship. Chris moved up to this area and lived in Mount Shasta for a while. She died unexpectedly, and so my wife and I inherited her library of metaphysical books. So one day I was at my house and I was shifting a crate of books around, and I happened to see this one volume that kind of was on top of the box that was written by a local author, Diane Robbins, called Telos, Subterranean City Beneath Mount Shasta. And I was fascinated by the title. I was kind of intrigued, and so I started flipping through the book. And just out of the pages of that came all of these characters and situations about this lost city under the mountain and these lost civilizations. And so that was the original impetus for me to start looking into the world of Telos and some of the local Mount Shasta New Age legends that originally gave rise to the songwriting project. Now, I've been a songwriter for a lot of years, and I've played in a lot of local bands with a wonderful crew of musicians. And so I hatched a crazy idea. What if I wrote an album's worth of material out of this world and then convinced all of my friends to join me in a band and perform it? So my first dream was to get booked at WESAC, which is a local New Age kind of trade show and spiritual sort of workshop seminar that happens in Mount Shasta in the summer. And so I applied to that and was politely declined. But in the wake of that, we decided to go ahead and throw a couple of shows in the local area. So we played a show in Mount Shasta, we played another one in Dunsmuir to sort of bring these songs out to a wider audience. And they were very popular, super fun. And then some of our bandmates have friends in the College of the Siskiyou's theater department. So it was those folks who approached us to build that out into a full production, which is what we saw recently.
Wow, that's great. Can you kind of tell us what the storyline of the play is?
Sure. So it doesn't have a direct narrative in the sense of maybe a traditional storybook with a beginning, middle, and end, but there are, broadly speaking, three sort of acts or pieces to the work. So the first one is sort of a cultural history piece where we as the band are the sort of cultural outreach of this subterranean civilization under Mount Shasta, and we're telling the cultural stories of our people. So there was basically these two sets of colonists that came from an alien planet and settled on the ancient Earth in Lemuria and Atlantis. Mm-hmm. And they had their civilization, they had this big falling out and a war that resulted, and the Lemurians had created this city under the mountain that was going to be their sanctuary. And so the first kind of block of songs really is about that cultural storytelling of those people, those civilizations. The second act then moves to these two characters within the inner world, Rosalia and Adama, who are sort of like the high priest and priestess of Telos. And as all adaptations must, I had to sort of wedge a love story into the middle of a narrative where there was not one originally. But I basically wrote it out of this idea that maybe there's this kind of sort of eons-long love affair between these two characters, and so they're singing to and about each other. So there's a beautiful duet between the two of them, and then each of them gets to sing about the other, and that's the second act of the piece. Then after the intermission, the third act is going to require a little backstory as well. So the idea is that there are these giant portals at the two poles of our planet, right, that are basically passageways into the interior of our planet, and as it turns out, the Earth is hollow. So there's a whole ocean that covers the inside surface of the spherical Earth with continents and people living in there, and a great crystalline sun that's been brought by the original colonists to light the inner world. And so as these spaceships come and go, the Earth has become this sort of a gathering place for all these different alien species. So the whole second, or the last piece of the play is really about what if all these different alien races were to have like a big dance party on the inside of the Earth. And so it's sort of this big, inclusive, multicultural celebration of all these different people and their lives together. And then the piece ends with basically coming back to Rosalie and Adama and the Telosians looking back towards the Pacific Ocean where their sunken home lies. And that finishes the piece.
So how did you come up with all the lyrics and the music?
Some of it was inspired by titles and bits and pieces that I found in some of the source material. So looking through Diane's books and websites about alien species that have colonized Earth and things that maybe to the minds of some might be sort of fringe theories about what the Earth is made of and how we interact with all these different interdimensional and extraterrestrial beings. But it just proved such a rich field of study for all these great ideas for lyrics and characters and things like that. So that was it. The other piece of it really for me was I look at this collection of songs as a chance for me to go back and sort of think about the music that I grew up with as a kid. So I was born in 1970. I grew up in the 70s with my parents' record collection, and it was all these great classic rock and glam rock albums. So everything from the Beatles to Spencer Davis Group and Traffic to David Bowie. And so just like the whole kind of classic rock and glam rock era was something that was a part of my life since I was young. So as I was writing these songs, I had a particular group of musicians in mind, and I really wanted all of the music to feel like it came from that era. And so as I was writing things and kind of arranging songs, I was always tracking it with these particular musicians and instrumental voices in mind. So the lyrics came from the source material and the stories that sort of came out of the creative process of working with this material. And so I'll just give you an example. So one of the earlier pieces in the play is What Did You Do in the Atlantean War? So this is an idea inspired by a World War I propaganda poster where a young girl is looking at her father saying, "What did you do in the Great War, Daddy?" And I thought, wow, what an intriguing and rich question, right? These beings that live these colossal timescales, thinking back to this cataclysm that happened to their civilization, tens of thousands of years ago. What did you do in the Atlantean War? And that was the jumping off place for the lyrics. And then kind of assembling and synthesizing all these musical influences created the musical side of it, along with just knowing that my friends were going to play it. So I wanted to make sure that those instrumental voices were present in the music. So one thing that has come up in talking with people about this project is that depending on where you fall on the spectrum of beliefs about, the city under the mountain, the Lemurians, all these alien races that come to visit Mount Shasta, it can be tempting maybe to try to lampoon or satirize this set of beliefs. And one of my kind of main projects when I was writing these songs was to write something that was maybe lighthearted and plays with those ideas a little bit, but in a way that still stays true to the spirit and to the stories, so that anybody who is a true believer, so to speak, would still be able to find something really meaningful and satisfying in these stories. So in terms of the folks that we worked with, there were a lot of creative decisions that come up about staging, about costumes, about whether you want to play something for laughs or not. And over again, I really had to sort of renew my focus on the fact that this is something that I wanted to be very inclusive and to be able to reach people regardless of how they feel about these stories. Because honestly, you know, the real heart of the stories we're telling are about a civilization that was destroyed and this sense of kind of cultural loss. It's about this love affair between these two beings. It's about this vision for a world where there are all kinds of different, you know, beings from different places with different beliefs that can come together and celebrate together.
Hey, so what did you think of the show?
I thought it was a total gift. It lifted everybody's hearts, made us remember why we're all here. I think it was a wonderful thing. I hope it goes far and wide.
It was so amazing and magical. Everybody was so into it. The people on the stage, the people merged in with the audience, with the musicians, everything was just so magical, so transformative. My heart was so deeply touched. So thank you to everyone for that beautiful gift.
We want to thank David Theno for being here today and to giving us an insight to his play, The Electromagnetic Soul Vehicle. So thank you very much, David.
Thank you for having me.
Your love is the answer to a question I've been asking for 1,000 years. Your love is the answer to a question I've been asking for 1,000 years. Your love is a mirror held up to the sun. Your love is the darkness before the world had begun.